Hi, Melinda here. You've probably seen or heard the term unacceptable count, but what does it actually mean? And why is it showing up in accountability conversations again? In this video, I'll explain how Senate Bill 1365 made this count part of the official accountability process in Texas and why it matters for campuses across the state. Let's take a closer look at how SB 1365 requires TEA to track the number of consecutive years a campus receives an unacceptable overall rating and why that count matters for interventions. Just a little background. Senate Bill 1365 was passed by the 87th legislature in 2021. It brought several changes to the state accountability system, some of which didn't get much attention at the time due to the pause in A through F ratings. In this video, we're going to focus in on one key provision in SB 1365, how TEA is required to track and report the number of consecutive years a campus has received an unacceptable overall rating. One of the core requirements in SB 1365 is that TEA must report the number of consecutive years each campus has received an unacceptable overall rating. That count now appears annually and plays a key role in determining interventions. Before we dive into the details, just a heads up. You're going to see several slides with explanations. I'll walk you through each part first, and then we'll bring it all together with some visuals to help make it stick. Let's get started. The count of consecutive years of unacceptable performance begins with your 2014 ratings. Unacceptable performance includes lots of different labels, such as Overall Improvement Required, or IR, which was the rating before Texas moved to the A through F system, F rating, and D rating. Now, D is under some really specific circumstances. Let's review those. When we think specifically about the D ratings, we're going to keep these things in mind. First, a rating of A, B, C, met standard or met alternative standard, that actually resets the consecutive count to 0 for that year. Second, there were some districts and campuses in the state of Texas in 2018 who were not rated Hurricane Harvey. This rating doesn't break or increase the consecutive years count. And third, a not rated declared state of disaster, which is what we were all rated in 2020 and 2021, does not break or increase the consecutive year count either. To sum it up, if your campus or district has a rating of not rated, it's like hitting pause. It won't count against you, but it also doesn't increase your count. In just a bit, I'll walk you through some real examples to show how this plays out. There's a few more minor details around SB 1365 to keep in mind. First, 2019 is the baseline year for tracking overall D ratings. Next, the first time a third overall D officially impacts the count of consecutive years of unacceptable performance is August 2024. And an overall rating of a D, now that doesn't break the unacceptable count. Now, let's talk about D ratings, specifically the third overall D. A third overall D will affect interventions and sanctions. It will also increase the count of consecutive years of unacceptable performance ratings. That increase will only occur if the campus hasn't broken the chain of consecutive years by earning an overall A, B, or C. One last piece of information before we dive into some examples to bring all of this to life visually. An overall rating of D that comes after an F or an IR doesn't immediately increase the unacceptable count. It actually pauses the count until the third overall D is earned. And on the flip side, if a campus earns a D after receiving an A, B, or C, that starts the D count tracking process. But the count of consecutive unacceptable years doesn't begin until the third overall D. Phew, that's a lot to take in. Well, let's look at some examples so we can see how this plays out. Let's start with an example of how a D can pause interventions up to 2 times. Here we are. On this example, you can see in 2018-19, this campus received a D. The descriptor labels a D as needs improvement. This puts the campus at an unacceptable count of a 0 and a first year of D, or D1. In 2019-2020 and 2020-21, all campuses in the state of Texas were rated not rated, declared state of disaster. There were no ratings for those 2 years. During this time, the unacceptable count did not increase, but you can also see that it didn't reset it or break that count either. That D1 count stays the same. Now let's move on to the 2021-2022 school year. This is where SB 1365 comes into play. For that accountability year, campuses were rated A, B, or C. But if a campus earned a D or F, it didn't receive that rating officially. Instead, the campus was marked as not rated SB 1365. This is a big deal because if a campus is labeled not rated, its unacceptable count holds. It doesn't go up. In this example, without SB 1365, the campus would have moved to a D2 because the campus actually received a scaled score of a 64. But because of SB 1365, that D didn't count towards the unacceptable count, and the campus held at a 0 D1. Now, if this campus had earned an A, B, or C, then the unacceptable count would reset and the D count would go away. But in this case, the official rating was not rated SB 1365, so the unacceptable count stays at a 0 D1. Here we are in 22-23. The campus receives a D rating. That D is labeled as needs improvement, and that D rating did not increase the unacceptable count, but you can see here it took the campus to a D2 status. Now let's look at year 23-24. The campus earns another D. That moves the campus to a D3. When a campus gets to the third D, it pushes the unacceptable count to a 1, and it keeps the D count at a D3. When we move to 24-25, you can see the campus earns a B. Because the campus earns a B, that resets the unacceptable count to a 0. It clears everything out. But when we move to 25-26, the campus earns a D. And what happens then? The campus goes back into their D count, and that campus starts over with Ds. Their unacceptable count is a 0, but they start over with their D count, and they become a 0 D1. Let's look at another example of how a D can pause interventions up to 2 times. In 2018-19, the campus earns a C, which is considered acceptable, so their unacceptable count is a 0. And in 2019-2020, in 2020-21, all campuses in the state of Texas were rated not rated, declared state of disaster, so the unacceptable count stays at 0. Then in 21-22, even though this campus earned a 54, their official rating was not rated SB 1365. So with that not rated label comes a hold on the unacceptable count. Then in 22-23, the campus received an F rating. As you can see in the descriptor, an F is considered unacceptable, which moves the unacceptable count to a 1. It's important to note, If SB 1365 hadn't been in effect the year before, this campus would now have an unacceptable count of 2. But because SB 1365 paused the count in 21-22, the count starts here at 1. Then in 23-24, the campus improves from an F to a D. The unacceptable count remains at 1 because a D is considered needs improvement and won't reset the count. Now the campus is a 1D1. And 24-25, the campus earns a D, which puts them at a 1D2. Then in 25-26, the campus doesn't improve and stays at a D. That third D puts them at a D3, which we know from the previous slide, 3 Ds in a row increases the unacceptable count. So that puts the unacceptable count at a 2D3. Now let's look at how a D, depending on where it lands, affects the statutory status of acceptable or unacceptable. In 2018-19, this campus earns a C, which is considered acceptable, and so the unacceptable count is a 0. In 2019 through 2022, the campus is not rated, and that not rated doesn't break, nor does it increase the years of unacceptable performance. Then, in 22-23, the campus received a D, which is needs improvement, and that keeps them at a 0 unacceptable count, but it puts them at a D1. Then, in 23-24, the campus doesn't improve. They earn a D. That pushes the D count to a D2. Notice here, these Ds keep the campus at an acceptable statutory status. Now, let's look at 24-25. The campus received an F. That descriptor is unacceptable, so their statutory status goes from acceptable to unacceptable, and their unacceptable count moves to a 1, and their D2 remains. Then, in 25-26, the campus improved their rating to a D, which puts them at their third D, and that third D increases their count of unacceptable performance. So even though the campus improved their rating from an F to a D, they are at their third D, which moves their unacceptable count to a 2D3. Let's focus in on the statutory status. This D follows an F, so the status is unacceptable. Unlike the 2 Ds prior to the F, those 2 Ds were acceptable because they followed a C rating. Let's look at another example of this. Once again, the campus starts out with a C, which is acceptable. Then we have our 2019 through 2022. The campus is not rated. Then in 22-23, the campus receives an F rating, which is unacceptable and pushes their count to 1. In 23-24, the campus improved to a D. Their unacceptable count stays at a 1, and they're now 1D1. Then, in 24-25, the campus receives another D, which puts them at a 1D2. Now notice, the statutory status here, because the 2 Ds follow an F, the campus stays at an unacceptable status. In order to break the chain of unacceptable status, the campus has to receive a C or better. And in 25-26, the campus does just that. They earn a C, and that breaks everything and brings the status to acceptable and the count back to 0. SB 1365 allows TEA to look back as far as 2014. We won't go back quite that far. Let's look at a long-term example that shows how the unacceptable count can build over time. In 2016-17, the campus received an IR rating, which is improvement required. That IR is unacceptable and pushes the count to a 1. In 17-18, the campus is also IR. which puts them at IR year 2. And you can see that that pushes the unacceptable count to a 2. Then, in 1819, the campus received a D. This is the first year campuses received A through F ratings. The D is considered needs improvement, and that keeps the campus at the unacceptable count of a 2, and this puts them at a D1 because it's their first D. Then in 2020 through 2022, we have our not rated, and once again, it doesn't break, nor does it increase the unacceptable count. In 22-23, the campus is a D, which pushes them to a D2, but the D doesn't break the status of unacceptable, so the campus is now at 2 D2. Then in 23-24, the campus receives a D, and that D is their third D, which adds to the unacceptable count. So now their unacceptable count is a 3D3. In 24-25, the campus continues to earn a D, but you can see from this example that each D after your third D adds to the unacceptable count. So this campus adds 1 to their unacceptable count, which puts them at a 4, and they're at a D4. Then in 25-26, the campus continues to earn a D. Now, they're not dropping to an F, but they're not improving. This D puts them at a D5 and puts their unacceptable count to a 5. Now, the big question here is, what happens when a campus reaches an unacceptable count of a 5? Well, at that point, TEA has the authority to take serious action, either by closing the campus or assigning a board of managers to replace the district's school board. And here's another key takeaway. This campus never received an F. It was repeated D ratings over time that placed the campus and the district at risk of major interventions. Let's walk through one final example. In 2015-16, the campus received an IR rating, which starts the unacceptable count at a 1. In 2016-17, they received another IR, bringing the count to 2. 17-18, the campus is not rated due to Hurricane Harvey. That doesn't increase or reset the count. It stays at 2. In 2018-19, the campus earns a D. Since they were already in an unacceptable status, this keeps the count at 2 and becomes D1. From 2020 through 2022, they're not rated again, so everything holds. In 2022-2023, another D makes it D2. The unacceptable count is still 2. In 23-24, the third D in a row moves them to D3, and now the count increases to a 3. Then in 24-25, the campus receives their fourth D, which puts them at D4. And remember, each D after the first 3 increases the unacceptable count by 1. So now they're at an unacceptable count of a 4. Then in 25-26, the campus receives another D, which puts them at a D5 and pushes them to an unacceptable count of 5. Even without an F rating, this campus is now at the threshold for significant intervention, which is closure or board of managers. So, to wrap up, the unacceptable count is more than just a technical detail. It's a key factor in determining when serious interventions are required. TEA tracks performance all the way back to 2014. Ratings of A, B, or C reset the count, while F ratings always push it higher. And if a campus hits 5 years of unacceptable performance, the consequences can be major, like closure or board of managers. That's why understanding SB 1365 isn't optional. It's essential. Got questions or need help thinking through what this means for you or your district? I've got you covered. I'm Melinda, Director of Accountability at Region 13, and I'm just an email away. And if this video helped, go ahead and pass it along to your team.